Good evening. This is Pastor Barbara, aka Preacher with Parrots. Today is May 24th, getting pretty close to the weekend of Memorial Day. And today is Wednesday night, so we're in the Old Testament. And I want to mention a couple of things about what we'll be doing tonight and what we'll be doing maybe tonight, maybe next week. We will finish tonight, the book of Exodus. What we're going to do tonight, I'll be going through quickly because it's a review. In the book of Exodus, Exodus begins when Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob's offspring have moved and are living in Egypt as guests of Joseph. But as the generations go by and the Pharaoh that appreciated Joseph, and Joseph, who was Hebrew but the second in command in Egypt, when they died and others took their place, they began to fear the Hebrews because they had so many children, they were so numerous. And just like other countries do, when there's a group you're afraid of or you don't want to have anything to do with them, you push them off to one side, and they made them slaves. Exodus begins when Moses is called by God to bring those slaves out of Egypt. And the idea is to get them as soon as possible into a land which God will give them. Something that's on my screen that I couldn't get rid of before now has an X, so I can X it out. It's about 3.5 months from the time that Moses and the Hebrews leave Egypt for good and get to Mount Sinai. For 40 days, so now we've got a month and a half, add 40 days to that. Moses is up on the mountain. During that time, we have the making of the golden calf. Moses throws down the law, breaks it, the stones in which God with his own finger has written the 10 Commandments. But he's up there longer, and God gives him a lot of laws besides just the 10 Commandments and a lot of instructions. He goes back up. Where we are now is that he has come down. On the mountain, God told him certain things. Do this, 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 and this. So now that he's down, he does this, 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 and this. That's why we have many things that we've had in the last couple of months repeated. That's why we won't spend a lot of time on it. When they get the tabernacle built, so we're going to go now from the time that Moses is called of God to go get them out of Egypt till he goes there, negotiates with Pharaoh over a long period of time, gets them out, goes to the mountain, gets the instructions, follows the instructions, builds the ark, builds the tabernacle, which is where we will be tonight. And then we come to the book of Leviticus. Leviticus and Levi both begin with L-E-V-I. Levi is one of the 12 sons of Israel. It is the tribe of Levi, every descendant, that will have some job to do in the tabernacle. And when we get the temple, hey, all we have is a glorified building that is built on the design of the tabernacle, which we have and will have tonight. So what Leviticus is all about is the laws. And Most of them, not all of them, some of the laws will be for everybody, but most of them are the laws regarding those who will work in the temple. All the descendants of Asaph or Asaph, I'm not sure how it is in English, will be singers. They will either sing in the choir, they will be choir directors, they will write music, whatever. Um, I should say prepare music, teach the music, and so forth. After that, we have some Levites will be doorkeepers. There's one psalm that said, I'd rather be a doorkeeper in the house of the Lord than to live in the tents of sin, and be somebody very, very important. So much of what we're going to be getting into will be the laws. Now, there's no doctrine. We get into the New Testament and we learn that we should do this, this, and this because it has to do with salvation. Or we should do this and this because Paul said that we would be living closer to God if we did. There is no, this is what the Bible teaches, how do you interpret it in the Old Testament? God doesn't tell them why he's doing anything. Nowadays, preachers will tell you. They will tell you that because of original sin, which occurred in the Garden of Eden, and God gave Satan control, leadership over certain nations, over certain things, that we have no, that doesn't come to play. God says, do this, you do it. Doesn't make any difference whether you understand it, doesn't make any difference whether you agree with it. Just, I'm your God, I brought you out of slavery, I'm telling you do this, I expect you to do this. Okay, let me open up our Bible. I was looking before I sat down because I thought that tonight I might do some reading from the Dead Sea Scrolls. I saw it a few minutes before I sat down, but I can't remember where. It's not in my room. It's not in here. It might be in the car because I was grocery shopping. All right, we're in the 30s. We did the regular, hang on. Almost there. All right, I'm going to read from chapter 36. We ended by talking about some of the laws of the Sabbath, and now he says, Moses called Bezaleel and Aholiab and every wise-hearted man in whose heart the Lord had put wisdom. Remember that the materials they needed for the tabernacle, they brought with them before they left Egypt. God told them to ask their neighbors. Now, they got along well with the neighbors. It wasn't the neighbors that had problems with them. It was the Pharaoh who was afraid. They asked them for jewelry. They asked them for gold. They asked them for silver. They asked them for brass. And of course, they were given to individuals. They were not given to Moses. They were not given to God. They were given to individuals. So they are now the property of certain individuals. but that's how they happened to be on the road, as well as purple, scarlet, and white fabric, uh, which they are in possession of now. And now God is telling them, I'm looking for people with talent to do certain things. He said he was looking for people with talent who were able to heat and hammer and make fancy designs so that all the furniture in the tabernacle, when it was covered with gold, would be pretty and it would be fancy. They received of Moses all the offering. He said, he said, the Lord put wisdom in everyone whose heart stirred him up to come to do the work. Moses gave them offerings. Where did Moses get the money? He collected it from the people. Did he take it from them? No. They gave it. We call it in church a free will offering. Something that nobody forces you to do. It's strongly suggested in the Bible. Your pastor will strongly suggest it, but it's still an offering. It's up to you. The children of Israel had brought for the work of the service of the sanctuary to make it withal. So the people gave money to pay people to do things, and they call them free offerings every morning. And all the wise men, these are not the wise men we talk about at Christmas, they spoke to Moses and they said, the people bring much more than enough. I haven't heard a pastor say that. I'm trying to think of, have I ever heard it? I don't think I have. Because there's always something that you would like to get. You would like it for the church, you would like it for the people, you think it would be good for the youth, it would be a good thing to have, but you really probably can't afford it, so you don't have it in your plans. But he says the people bring much more than enough for the service of the work which the Lord commanded us to make. And Moses gave commandment, and they caused it to be proclaimed throughout the camp, saying, let neither man nor woman make any more work for the offering of the sanctuary. So the people were restrained from bringing. For the stuff that they had was sufficient for all the work to make it, and too much. They had everything they needed, and they had more. And every wise-hearted man among them worked the work of the tabernacle. They made 10 curtains of fine twined scarlet with cherubims of cunning work. This was one of the curtains. There were 3 curtains. Well, let me tell you about 2. When you came into the building, because there was a fence or wall around the compound, and when you went in, there were 2 pieces of furniture outside covered with brass. The first one was the altar, where animals were sacrificed. There was blood, there was fire, there was the killing of the animals, and so forth. And then between the altar and the door of the building, was a large, I'm looking today, I got out and I cleaned my bird bath. Some of the birds, I praise, some of the birds that come to see me every year have been coming around the that's, I don't know if that's Captain or Kiki, but I'm guessing it's Captain because he was calling before and I didn't pay attention to him. And they've been looking at me. So I don't buy special stuff for them, but I give them everything that my birds have left over that, falls down out of the cage and so forth. Now, I took and put some things out there where I put the food, and I got the bird bath. I cleaned it up, I filled it with water, and it looked similar to that bird bath, a little bit bigger. It contained water because they had to ceremoniously wash their hands and feet. Now, those who worked in blood possibly needed to bathe, needed to wash. But then we had those that didn't need to wash, that were just going in the building. But they needed to do something that said to the people, we're getting clean. They needed to wash their hands and they needed to wash their feet. Now this has to do with the making of the tabernacle. Every wise-hearted man among them that worked at the tabernacle made 10 curtains. Now the veil is made of curtains, but it's not called curtains. The length of one curtain was 28 cubits. This is a cubit. It's been considered 18 inches since we don't all have the same size arm. So 2 cubits makes a yard. So if there were 28, that's 14 yards. And they were all one size. And he coupled 5 curtains to another, and another 5 to another. And he made loops. And he put these curtains, he had 50 latches of gold. The latches simply held one curtain to another curtain. I showed you, and I don't have the high priest here. I'll bring my model of the high priest next time. I'll try to get in the house before 1 hour. I didn't get home until it was a little less than an hour before I started, and I don't like to do that. But some things happened, and they happened late in the day, and I couldn't leave until that happened. But I'll bring it. You remember that there were little loops, and that's what they called them, latches. 50 loops he made in one curtain, 50 loops in another. The length of one curtain was 34 cubits. That's 17 yards. Since I'm reading from the King James. I want to get where he starts talking about the boards. In verse 27, for the sides of the tabernacle westward, he made 6 boards. 2 boards he made for corners of the tabernacle in the 2 sides. And they were coupled beneath and coupled together. In the middle bar, to shoot through the boards from one end to the other, he overlaid the boards with gold. And he made 3 rings to hold them in places. And he made a hanging for the tabernacle door. This was what he described just a moment ago. This is, instead of a door, I'm remembering a place we stayed in Texas one time. We were about 6 months without a trailer. And we stayed in different people's houses. We got back up to Michigan, and I ran into an English-speaking pastor who lived in a trailer, and he knew of a place that he thought he could get us a very good deal, and he did. But for 6 months, more or less, we stayed wherever there was a place to stay. And we stayed one place that they didn't have doors. Like, they had an outside door, but between the rooms, there were no doors. And they had a lot of children, and the children were very inquisitive. And they thought I was very white. And they were interested to know if this white extended beyond my face and hands, or arms, whatever they could see. And I had no trust for those hangings. I would have if they were adults, whatever. But this was how you got into the building, by these hangings. Now he discusses the making of the ark. Now, we've already been told a lot about the ark. We know its dimensions. We know it's made of shittim wood. We know it's covered with gold. Then we have the making of the table, the making of the lampstand, the making of the incense altar. And so for all of chapter 37, this is the making of something we already know about. Now, they made the ark of shittim wood, 2 cubits and a half was the length. They overlaid it with pure gold. I'm skipping some phrases because we've had them once or twice already. And he put the staves in the rings so that they never had to touch the actual pieces of furniture. And he put the staves into the rings to bear the ark. So that, remember, the tabernacle was something that was movable. And as they moved, they had to disassemble it and everything and take it with them. And he made cherubims of gold, and he put them on the 2 ends of the mercy seat. By way of remembering, the mercy seat covered the ark. It was a lid, and it was called the mercy seat. Why would you call a lid a mercy seat? Because God said he would reside. Now, we're in the book of Acts in the New Testament. We know God is everywhere. They didn't have that concept. They needed to know, where's God? If we need him, where are we going to find him? And he said, I will be above the mercy seat, the lid of the ark, and the 2 cherubs, whose wings stood inside of there. That's where I'll be. 1 cherub on one end, 1 on the other end. And the cherubs spread out their wings on high and covered with their wings over the mercy seat, with their faces looking at one another. Even to the mercy seat seatward were the faces of the cherubims. Now, So they have started at the Holy of Holies. There's only one piece of furniture. So now we move to the holy place. The Holy of Holies nobody could go into except once a year, and that was the high priest. But every day there will be a lot of activity in the holy place. Middle of the, well, not the middle of the chapter, about fourth of the way down, we have the making of the table. The table is the table of showbread. We already know what it looks like. We know what it's made of. He made a border around it and a crown of gold for the border. And he cast the 4 rings of gold and so forth. And he made the vessels. On top of the table of showbread was, they call it a loaf. I call it a fat tortilla. It was not made with leaven, so it did not rise. So it doesn't look like Wonder Bread. And on top of the table of showbread was not only the 12 loaves or fat tortillas, but anything they might need. Things to pick things up with, and different utensils were kept up there. Now we go to verse 17 and we talk about making the lampstand. Let me say again, in case people haven't heard before or haven't seen a previous video. The Ark of the Covenant speaks of Jesus, as do all the pieces of furniture in the tabernacle. They don't realize this. They only know that they're told to do things and to do it a certain way. They have no idea. People came along later and they look at a shadow. If you look at somebody's shadow, you're looking at a almost, I remember when I was teaching 6th grade, I think I did it in the 2nd grade. I taught that for 2 years. But I used to put a sheet of paper on the chalkboard and a lamp behind the kids, and I would get their profile, and I would outline it, and then I would take it down later, and while I'm looking at the kid, I would cut it and put it up for the end of the year for parents' night or whatever, and everybody could pick out their kid. That's a shadow. You get no color, you get no detail, nothing but a shadow. And then, of course, what is another option? Another option would be a picture. That would give you a lot more detail. This, eventually in the Old Testament, became a shadow. When Jesus begins, and on Sunday we started talking about the fact that Jesus began to tell his disciples about his death and resurrection, and occasionally ascension into heaven. He said, I go to my Father. So it went from shadow to picture, but a picture doesn't move, a picture doesn't talk. And even when these things happened in the life of Christ, many of his own disciples didn't even know what was going on. And Sunday we talked about some things he talked about, and they understood. And what they didn't understand, they were afraid to ask, and they didn't, so they didn't know. But that's what a foreshadow is. You get a clue. But that's not much. Everything, the Holy of Holies, is the presence of divinity, the presence of God the Father, God the Son, with us on this earth, close to us. The table of showbread, bread you have to live. It was changed every year. Every day. Every day it was taken down and the priests would literally eat it, and new was put there. And Christ is our subsistence. He doesn't make us and leave us, but he makes us and he feeds us, he keeps us going, he keeps us alive, he keeps us going. Now we get to the lampstand. Christ is the light of the world. The lampstand was like a candelabra. You see, I've got some on the organ. Those are fake candles. Somebody came for a Thanksgiving dinner and brought that to me as a gift. I got a little thing that I click, and if the batteries are in it, they light up. That was the only light. There were no windows. The door was covered with a curtain. There was no light in there during the day. There was no light in there during the night. We would know, we would see, we would understand nothing if it wasn't for Christ. Now, he says about the lampstand, he made the candlestick of pure gold, of beaten work, fancy. And the branch, there was the candlestick, and then there was the branch, because there were eight different lamps in one. And it had knobs on it and flowers, and 6 branches going out of the sides. Therefore, 3 branches of the candlestick on one side and 3 on the other. 3 bowls made of the fashion of almonds, a knot, a flower, etc. And in the candlestick were 4 bowls. They looked like almonds. Their knops, their branches were the same. They were beaten work of fine gold. And he made his 7 lamps and his snuffers and all of that out of pure gold. Of a talent of pure gold made he the vessel thereof. Now the incense for the altar. The holy place has 1 piece of furniture, the Ark of the Covenant. The holy place has 3. When you go in to the right, is the table of showbread. To the left is the lamp. And straight ahead, right in front of the curtain that closes off the entrance to the Holy of Holies, is the incense altar. Remember that for everything that was used, we've already been given the recipe for the oil that the candelabra or the lampstand burns. Now he's talking about the incense altar. It's smaller. 2.5 feet. It's not very high off the ground. That is where they have the morning offering and the evening offering. And he made the incense altar, and he tells them what he made of it and the size of it, which we've already know about. It was overlaid with pure gold. We already know that. We know it had the rings. We know what the rings were for, so that, and it said, and he made the holy anointing oil, the pure incense of sweet spices, according to the work of the apothecary. Now, we're in chapter 38, and there are only 40 chapters, so we're making very good time. We'll have a lot of music tonight, unless I go a little bit into Leviticus. Now we have the making of the altar and the basin. That's outside. In the past, when they described it to us, they started with the outside of the building, then the holy place, then the holy of holies. Tonight, in what I'm reading, and they're telling us about the actual builder, what they did. Because on the mountain, we were told what they would do, what they should do. They start with the presence of God with us in the Holy of Holies. And then the life-sustaining showbread, the light-giving light, and then the incense, which was a form of worship, because they lit and burned the incense, and you could smell it if you were in the Holy of Holies. Now we're outside. Those two pieces of furniture are not covered with gold. They're covered with brass. He made the altar of the burnt offering of shittim wood. It's 5 cubits in length. That would be 2.5 feet long. And it's 4 square. So it's square. So it's 2.5 by 2.5. He made the horns on the altar. There were little horns in each corner. He made the altar a brazen grate. It was a grate, or think of a barbecue, and that is covered with brass. And he made all the vessels. There were flesh hooks. They had to hook up certain portions of the animals which had been sacrificed. There were shovels, there were basins, there were fire pans, there were vessels, and all these were made of brass. And then he made an altar of brass, and he had rings on it, and they could put the poles through them so it didn't have to be touched. And he made the laver, and then he made the laver, and he made it of brass. The laver, I told you, because I'm sitting here and I'm looking outside. It's not dark yet. At least this close to the ocean. And I'm looking at my bird bath. It is simply something that holds water, nothing more, nothing less. Now we're at verse 9, and we're talking about the enclosure. So we're talking about the wall that's around it. And he made the court on the south side. And he tells about hanging the curtains and so forth. Verse 11, on the north side, the hangings were 100 cubits. That would be 50 feet, yards. And on the west side, the pillars 10 and their sockets and so forth. And on the east, there were 50. It was rectangular. So those on one side would be this side, and the side facing it would be much smaller than those that were on the length of it. 3 tribes were on the north, 3 on the south, 3 on the east, 3 on the west. Now, some tribes were large, some were small. He made the enclosure and he said on one side, there were hangings. And he said, you shall put therein, well, let me back up a verse or two. Oh, I turned 2 pages instead of 1. Sorry about that. Now he talks about the whole tabernacle. Verse 21 of 38. This is the sum of the tabernacle, even the tabernacle of testimony. Everything in there testifies to something about something. And all the gold he's talking about the people that we've mentioned their names before that did outstanding work. It said with one of them, the engravers, cunning workmen, an embroiderer, because we had on this figures of things, so there had to be embroidery. And those who worked in the silver, those that worked in brass, and the sockets that held these things together. That's the sum total of the tabernacle. Now he's talking about the priest's clothes. Well, we got 2 videos on that because I dropped something on the keyboard and broke one of the videos in half. So we're on the priest clothing again. Blue, purple, scarlet. He made the ephod of gold, blue, and purple, and scarlet, and fine twined linen. They beat the gold, and they cut it into wires. Now, it was a little hard for me working with a doll, trying to get adult clothing to look like something. But I had no problem finding extra large, well, it's something that, this, for example, that I'm wearing is just regular country, just regular country blouse, except it's got lace in it. You can buy lace like this. They needed gold. How do you manage that? You beat it into a flat sheet, pure gold, but you beat it into a flat sheet and let it harden. And then you cut it so fine that it's probably about this thick. And it's not all over the garment, but where it is, it's sewed on. They made onyx stones 6 tribes, the names were engraved in this onyx stone, and 6 tribes, the names were engraved in this one. And then they put them on the shoulders of the ephod. The ephod is what the high priest wears, not what all the priests wear. The high priest has an ephod. It has a front and a back, and it hooks together with these onyx stones here. And then, of course, he on the hem of his garment are the pomegranates, because as I told you, I've done a lot of cleaning since I saw you last Wednesday. And I think I told you one time that when I was working on my master's degree, I had a teacher that made me, she didn't suggest it, she made me go. She gave me the address of the place, a gourd farm. And I had to buy gourds and make musical instruments of Latin America out of these gourds. Well, when these gourds dry up, the seeds in them still rattle. They've got moisture in them, but they've got seeds too. And you let them sit for a few years and that other stuff dries up. And all you've got is the outside of the gourd and those seeds, and they rattle. And I happen to see a couple of those. If I would have thought, I'll try to remember to bring them up Wednesday. They're down in one of the guest rooms. I think they're dumb looking things. I don't know why she thought, because I was doing the music of Latin America, was what my thesis was about. And the educational part of it was, because it was a new method, every few years they come up with a new way of teaching that every kid is going to learn and never forget. And now the kids just don't learn. But there was one in that particular year, and they wanted people to write thesis on it. And then there were teachers that approached me that wanted to make a couple of changes or a couple of additions, and then it would be a book written by them and me. I don't think so. Anything I write, I don't want other people adding or taking away or doing stuff too. So, but that's why they wanted me to be making those crazy things. I see no value. I didn't learn anything by making them, nothing that made me a better teacher. I don't know. Anyway, the pomegranates, I believe, were added to the hem of the garment, as were bells, so that when the high priest once a year was in the Holy of Holies, the priest on the other side of the veil, which was made of silver curtains, could hear him walk and know he hadn't failed to prepare correctly, and he in fact was still alive. And then finally here, now the Temple Institute has a crown made of gold, and in the crown is written, "Holiness unto the Lord." But this was something he wore here, and it had blue strings that held it on the forehead, which said, "Holiness unto the Lord." Now, we come to something we haven't heard before, and we're in chapter 39, verse 32. the tabernacle is completed. Thus was all the work of the tabernacle of the tent of the congregation finished, and the children of Israel did according to all that the Lord commanded Moses. So did they. They did that. And they brought the tabernacle unto Moses, the tent, and all its furniture, his taches, the boards, the bars, the pillars, the sockets, the covering of ram skins. Now we're talking about having a covering for it. We've got something like, I'm still working on these, as Dogwood would say, antique cassettes. They brought him the building. Part of this building is the holy place, which goes through about here. And the rest is the Holy of Holies. But this is all hollow in here. Now they got to cover it with something. Okay, because this is hollow. Otherwise it would rain in there. Dirt would get in there. All things would happen in there. There are 4 coverings. I'll try to explain how I believe these coverings were put up there. I believe they're a little bit different than just 1, 2, 3, 4. This is why I believe that. I hadn't thought about it when I was in Bible college. I didn't think about it for many years of ministry until I actually started making, well, I made the high priest clothing, and out of a shoebox I made a little tabernacle. Everything was visible to somebody, and everything had meaning. So there was nothing that was hidden. Hang on, I want to do something here. Okay, I've got some. You'd think I can better prepare it instead of just looking for stuff on my desk that I can use. Okay. If there are 4 coverings, this is 1. I'm going to mark it 1. I think I'd mark it with the right end, wouldn't you? 1. Top. I'm going to make a T for top. This is the second one. This is the third one. And this is the bottom one. When I'm actually building something, or I'm actually teaching something and really trying to explain it, then I can do better. Here's the bottom. See, I've got a B for bottom. Here's the bottom. Here's the number 2. Here's number 3. Here's the top. Now, this is just my opinion. Some people believe that 1, 2, 3, 4, this is how they covered the tabernacle. If you were inside the tabernacle, you would see this, wouldn't you? If you were outside the tabernacle, well, I'm trying to not drop a book here. If you're on the outside, you would see that. When are you going to see, and who is going to see 2 and 3? 1 gets seen from the outside, 4 gets seen from the bottom. But there's 2. They're made of certain things. There must be a reason. Let me read them. The first day of the first month, they're setting up the tabernacle now. They got it made. You remember just before they left Egypt, Moses said, this is the first month, and this is the first day. Chapter 40, which is the last chapter in the book of Exodus, says, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, on the first day of the first month shall you set up the tabernacle of the tent of the congregation. That would be an anniversary, wouldn't it? And thou shalt put therein the ark of the testimony, and cover the ark with the veil. The ark of the covenant is going to be separated from what the people can see by a veil. Not by a wall, but by a veil. They won't see it when it's set up. And you'll bring in the table and set in order the things that are to be set on it. And you bring in the candlestick and you light the lamps. And you bring in the altar of gold for incense before the ark of the testimony. Going to be on the other side of the veil, but it's going to be before it, where the scent, the perfume, the essence will be obvious from the Holy of Holies. And you'll put the altar of burnt offering, that would be outside, covered with brass, before the door of the tabernacle. You walk in the compound, the canvas, you walk in, and you're going to see the altar, a burnt offering. And then you set up the court around about. Well, then in the same verse that he says, the next verse, it says, you shall put the laver. Anybody here remember lava soap, L-A-V-A? Lavar in Spanish, and in a lot of the Latin languages means to wash. And lava soap was what mechanics and people that really got their hands dirty used. We had it in our house. I didn't have to use it very often, but my dad used it every day. It means to wash. And you set the laver between the tent of the congregation of the altar, and you put water in it. They're getting ready to use it for the first time now. They've got it built, but it's not going to be used. This is the last chapter. When we get to the next chapter, we start using all this stuff. And you set up the court around it, and you will anoint the altar of burnt offering and all of its vessels, the hooks, the knives, everything that you need. And you anoint the laver, and you sacrifice it, and you bring Aaron and his sons onto the door of the tabernacle, and you wash them with water. Now, eventually, they're going to wash themselves. Some churches, Christian churches, have customs that are similar. I can remember whenever we had a funeral in the family or a death in the family, going to the Catholic Church and there being holy water at the door. In the ruins of the building that the people who first copied the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's water at the door. Now, the historians believe that it was not for any religious purpose or any purpose of remembering anything, but simply the fact that it was practical. They had something like this, the wall was in between, you could pour water in here, it would go in there. The Catholic Church does have a place for holy water at the door. Now, I haven't been in a Catholic Church, a regular church, for many years. I've been to Mass in some Catholic hospitals, but they are like a church within another building. So I presume that that is still being done. In addition, when I was in the Holy Land and in some of the other lands around it that have Muslims, they take off their shoes. And I remember one place was very good to us. They didn't make us take off our shoes, but they gave us, have you ever seen these booties that they put on doctors' shoes when they're going in the operating room? Well, they gave us something like that. We got to leave our shoes on. Now, I've been in other buildings where I had to take my shoes off. And I'm not super cautious, but I just soon, if I'm going to walk where thousands of people have walked and will walk again, I just soon have my shoes or my stockings on. But anyway, I've done that. So there are little bits of hints of some of this stuff in some other religions. We're getting ready to get to the good stuff here. There's just a few verses of it before we end. It said, and you anoint the burnt offering, you anoint it. You bring in Aaron and his sons, and you stand them, and you wash them. Okay. Altar of covenant. Altar of testimony. Presence of God. Table of showbread. Sustenance, keeping power of God. Lamp. Christ is the light. Okay. Now we're outside. What does the laver tell us? Keeping clean. the power of consecration and holiness. And what does the altar of sacrifice tell us? That a perfect lamb, perfect, not one that's going to die anyway of something, perfect lamb, never did anything wrong, will have his blood shed and will die, in order that all these 12 tribes, parked in different tents around the tabernacle, will one time a year get their sins forgiven. Okay, so Aaron, the holy garments are put on him. He's anointed, which means he's sanctified. Sanctification means two things. One, set aside for a certain purpose. Aaron's not going to be a preacher on Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday. He will continuously be the high priest, not only to do the ceremonies, but for whatever he's needed. If a question is ever asked and he needs to go into the Urim and Thummim, he is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the high priest. He is anointed, set aside, not holy, not pure, but set aside for a particular purpose in God's word. And his sons are brought in, and they're put certain coats on them, and they're anointed, same way their fathers were, for an everlasting priesthood throughout their generations. As long as there are Jews, as long as there are Hebrews, there will be high priests and there will be priests. And there's a Sanhedrin now. They have asked Rabbi Kahane to be the high priest. And there are about 15 others, I'm guessing between 10 and 15 others who are priests, and there are 15 or 20 now going to the institute. They qualify, they have proven they are descendants of Aaron, and they're males, and they qualify to be priests, and they're going to school for that. But this is for a everlasting priesthood. Somebody can't say, oh, by the way, we decided instead of having priests now we're going to have deacons. Can't do that. God told Moses, this is for an everlasting priesthood throughout their generation, as long as there's any of them alive. There will be this everlasting priesthood. And it came to pass in the first month, in the second year, beginning the first day of the second year, on the first day of the month, that the tabernacle was reared up. That's King James Version. And the sockets were fastened, and they were set up on the boards. And he spread abroad the tent over the tabernacle and put the covering on the tent above it. And he put the testimony into the ark. And he set the staves on the ark and put the mercy seat above the ark. That's the lid. And he put the table in the tent with the 12 fat tortillas. And he put the candlestick in the tent of the congregation. And he lighted the lamps, because they were little containers with oil. And they were lit, and the oil burned. And he lighted the lamps, and he put the golden altar in front of the tent of the congregation before the veil. That's the one with the perfume. And he burnt sweet incense thereof. First time they made it, but it was not a part of the tabernacle until right now. So there hasn't been an offering of incense until right now. And he set up the hanging at the door of the tabernacle. That's where you go in to the holy place. And he put the altar of burnt offerings by the door of the tabernacle. When you walk in, that's the first piece of furniture you see. And he offered upon the burnt offering the meat offering and as the Lord commanded Moses. And he put the laver between the tent of the congregation and the altar, and he put the water there to wash everybody. And Moses and Aaron and his sons washed their hands and their feet, and they went into the tent of the congregation. And when they came near the altar, they washed as the Lord commanded Moses. And he reared up the court around the tabernacle and the altar, and set up the hanging in the court gate. So Moses finished work. 1 year from the time they left Egypt. 3.5 months to get to Mount Sinai. 40 days on Mount Sinai, back on Mount Sinai. Now they made it. Now they got it put together. We've only got 5 or 6 verses left. What do you think happens next? Don't look it up. Think. What do you think happens next? Let me remind you that the temple was a magnificent, costly. In other words, there's a big diamond, I think, called the Hope Diamond. If you see a little diamond on somebody's ring finger announcing that they're engaged, and you see this huge uncut diamond, the temple is the huge uncut diamond. The tabernacle was the little tiny, tiny piece. If when they built the temple, and it was time to light the sacrifice, and they didn't get out their little cup of fire to light it, but fire came from heaven. And it was so powerful. The glory of the Lord was so great. And it filled the temple. And the priests weren't able to do their job. What do you think happened here? Then a cloud covered the tent of the congregation, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Moses didn't do that. Aaron didn't do that. Only God could do that. And Moses was not able to enter the tent of the congregation because the cloud abode thereon, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. When the cloud was taken up from over the tabernacle, the children of Israel went onward in all their journeys. But if the cloud was not taken up, if this cloud rose, then the people said, oh, it's time to go. They go in, they put those rods through those rings so they can carry these things, and they dismantle all of it. It's time to go. But when the cloud descends, nobody goes anywhere. But if the cloud were not taken up, then they journeyed not till the day that it was taken up. For the cloud, this is the last verse. For the cloud of the Lord was upon the tabernacle by day, and fire was on it by night, in the sight of all of the house of Israel, throughout all of their journeys. As long as they were traveling, they had this tabernacle. There was a cloud that gave them, they're in the desert now. They're hot. They're in a cloud that protects them from the hot sun. When that lifts, then they go. We are now in the book of Leviticus. I'm not going to read but one or two verses because I want you to see what it's like. Now they're going to discuss what the priests are going to do, how life is going to be, the burnt offerings, the meat offerings, the peace offerings, the sin offerings, the sacrifices, the law of the offerings, the regulations for the repayment of the offerings, the sin offerings, the peace offerings, and Aaron and his sons are going to be ordained. Oh, they were in the ministry a whole lot longer than I was before I was ordained. Anyway, that's what the book of Leviticus is going to be like. I'm going to close our video. We've been an hour and 17 minutes, and we'll chat in just a minute. You want to get us so we can chat, Larry? And to those of you that are viewing on the video, blessings on you till the next video.